Welcome to my channel. Try to hear the latest story.
Look, I need to tell someone about what happened because everyone's acting like I'm some kind of villain when all I wanted was a man who could actually handle being with a real woman who comes with real responsibilities. I'm Brianna. I'm 29, and I thought I finally found someone who understood what it meant to be part of an actual family. But apparently, Charles was just another weak guy who couldn't step up when it mattered. So here's the deal. I was doing perfectly fine raising my twin boys, Jaden and Caden, on my own. They're 7 now, and honestly, I've been handling everything since their father decided to disappear to who knows where. I had my job at the office, we had our little apartment, and we had our routine down. Was it expensive covering everything alone? Obviously. But I wasn't sitting around waiting for some man to rescue me. Then Charles shows up through my friend Michelle last year. He works in warehouse management, drives a nice truck, has his own place. Nothing flashy, but clearly stable. And the way he was with the boys from the start? Most guys get all weird when they find out you have kids, but Charles actually seemed to enjoy being around them. Between us, though, I was definitely paying attention to certain things, like how he always insisted on paying when we went out. How he'd bring the boys little treats without me asking. How he'd offer to fix things around my place just because he noticed they needed fixing. These aren't random nice gestures. These are signs of a man who knows how to treat a family properly. The boys loved him immediately, which was honestly the biggest green flag for me. Jaden and Caden don't warm up to just anyone, but they were always excited when Charles was coming over. He'd play games with them, help with homework, even came to their soccer games. Most men run when they realize dating me means being around children, but Charles seemed to genuinely care about them. After about 3 months, I started thinking this could actually be something serious. He was consistent, reliable, great with the boys, and clearly cared about all of us. We'd talk about the future, and he'd mention wanting a family someday, and I'm thinking, hello, there's a ready-made family right here waiting for you. But here's what was really bothering me. I was still struggling with all the expenses that come with raising 2 kids alone. Charles would see me stressed about bills sometimes and offer to help with groceries or gas, which was sweet, but I could tell he didn't really understand the full picture of what it actually costs to support children properly. I started being more open about my reality. You know, when he'd come over and see me paying bills, I'd let him see what those numbers actually looked like. When the boys needed things we couldn't afford right away, I'd explain in front of Charles why we had to wait. Not to manipulate anyone, but because this is my life, and if he wanted to be part of it, he needed to understand what that really meant. Charles started asking more questions about my finances, how much daycare cost, what my monthly budget looked like, stuff like that. I thought he was trying to understand my situation better so he could figure out how to help. Looking back, he was probably calculating whether I was worth the investment, which is pretty selfish when you think about it. By 8 months in, I was ready to start talking about taking the next step. The boys were asking when Charles was going to live with us, and honestly, it made perfect sense. We were spending most of our time together anyway. Remember? And having him around more would be better for everyone. Plus, if we were splitting expenses, I could actually start saving money instead of just barely getting by every month. So I started dropping hints about how nice it would be if we all lived together. Nothing crazy, just mentioning how the boys were always asking when Charles was coming over, or how much easier it would be to coordinate our schedules if we shared space. I'd talk about how much money I was throwing away on rent for a place that was honestly too small for 3 people. Charles seemed interested at first, asking questions about timeline and what kind of place I was thinking. But then he started getting all analytical about it, wanting to talk budgets and who would pay what, and all these practical details that felt like he was missing the bigger picture. Like, we love each other, we want to be together more, the boys adore you, why are we getting bogged down in spreadsheets? That's when I decided to be honest about what I really wanted. I told him about my dream of being able to stay home with the boys while they're still young. And before anyone says I'm just looking for someone to take care of me, this is about what's best for Jaden and Caden. Think about it. They're 7 years old, which means they still need so much attention and guidance. Right now, I'm dropping them off at before school care at 7 in the morning and picking them up at 6 at night. That's 11 hours a day that other people are raising my children because I have to work just to barely cover our expenses. If Charles and I moved in together and he could handle the major bills, I could finally be the mother I've always wanted to be. I could pick them up from school and actually help with homework instead of rushing through it after dinner. I could volunteer at their school, be there when they're sick, make real home-cooked meals instead of grabbing fast food because I'm too exhausted to cook. This isn't some fantasy. This is about giving my children the stability they deserve. And honestly, it would probably save money in the long run because we wouldn't be paying for all that childcare. Charles makes good money, definitely enough to support a family if we're smart about it. When I explained all this to him, he got this weird look on his face, like he was trying to process what I was saying, but couldn't wrap his head around it. He started asking all these hypothetical questions about what would happen if he lost his job, or what my plan was when the boys got older, instead of focusing on what we could build together right now. I tried to help him understand that this wasn't just about money. It was about our values and what kind of family we wanted to create. I told him how my mom stayed home with me and my sister when we were young, and how much security that gave us growing up. But Charles kept coming back to the financial stuff, wanting exact numbers and costs like some kind of accountant. That's when I realized he might need some help understanding how serious I was about this. So I started doing research on apartments that would work for a family of 4, just to show him I was thinking practically about our future. I found some really nice places that were definitely affordable on his salary, especially if we were smart about splitting other expenses. I also started having conversations with the boys about what it would be like when we all lived together. Not to pressure Charles, but because they were naturally curious. And honestly, their excitement about the idea just reinforced that this was the right decision for our family. Jaden started asking Charles if he could help with his science project when we moved in together. And Caden wanted to know if Charles would come to his soccer games as his stepdad. These are the things that matter: real relationships and family bonds, not worst-case financial scenarios. The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that this was what we all needed. I wasn't asking Charles to give up his dreams. I was asking him to invest in ours. To take the relationship seriously enough to make the commitment that would benefit everyone. When he still seemed hesitant after weeks of conversations, I decided I needed to be more direct. If he wasn't ready to step up and be the partner and father figure we needed, then what were we even doing? I wasn't going to waste my time or the boys' emotions on someone who was just playing house. So I sat him down and laid it all out. I told him I needed to know where he stood because I had 2 little boys whose hearts were getting attached to him, and I wasn't going to let them get hurt by someone who wasn't serious about commitment. His reaction was not what I expected at all. Instead of being happy that I was ready to take this step with him, he started getting all stressed about being the sole provider for 4 people. He kept talking about his budget and whether he could afford everything on his own. Like, okay, it's a big responsibility, but this is what real relationships look like when you're building a future together. I tried to explain that this wasn't just about money. It was about commitment and showing the boys what a real man looks like. But Charles kept fixating on these worst-case scenarios, like what if he got laid off, or what if there was an emergency. These are risks every family faces, and they figure it out because they love each other. What really bothered me was him saying he wasn't comfortable being the only one bringing in income, like that was somehow unfair. But hello, I've been the only one bringing in income for my family for years. The difference is that now we'd be a team, and he'd have me taking care of everything at home so he could focus on work. I pointed out how this would actually make his life easier. Coming home to a clean house and dinner ready. Not worrying about scheduling conflicts when the boys had appointments, having someone handle all the day-to-day family stuff. But he was so focused on the financial aspect that he couldn't see the bigger picture. Then he said something that really ticked me off. He said he didn't think it was necessary for me to stay home because the boys were in school most of the day anyway. Excuse me? Just because they're in school doesn't mean they don't need their mom available. What about sick days, early dismissals, school holidays, summer break? What about homework help and emotional support and all the things that come up when you're raising children? That's when I realized I might need backup in helping him understand how important this was. So I talked to my mom about the situation, and she completely agreed with me. She reminded me how much it meant when she was able to stay home with us kids, and how that's probably why I turned out to be such a good mom myself. My mom offered to talk to Charles just to give him perspective from someone who's been through this before. I thought that was perfect because sometimes men need to hear things from other people before they really get it. My mom has a way of explaining things that make sense. When my mom called him, she was really sweet at first, asking how he was doing and mentioning how much the boys talk about him. But then she explained that when you love someone with children, you have to be willing to prioritize those children's needs, even if it means making sacrifices. She told him this was his chance to show what kind of man he really was, whether he could handle real responsibility or was just another guy who wanted the fun parts of family life without the commitment. She pointed out that he was lucky to find a woman like me who knew how to be a good mother and partner. But instead of appreciating her wisdom and experience, Charles got all defensive and told my mom it wasn't her business. Then he actually hung up on her. I couldn't believe it when she called me back. This is the woman who raised me and knows what's best for her grandchildren, and he just dismissed her like that. When I confronted Charles about it, he tried to turn it around on me, saying I shouldn't have gotten my family involved. But I'm like, we are talking about building a family together. Of course, my family is going to have opinions. My mom wasn't being controlling. She was trying to help him understand what he was signing up for. That conversation really opened my eyes to how selfish Charles was being. Instead of being grateful that I was willing to commit to a future with him, he was treating it like some kind of burden. Instead of seeing my mom's call as caring advice, he saw it as interference. So I told Charles straight up, if we're going to move in together, I need to know you're committed to making this work for all of us, including supporting me being home with the boys. But instead of stepping up, he started getting weird and distant about it. Suddenly, he was too busy to come over as much, making excuses about work projects. When I'd text him, it would take hours to get short, cold responses. It was like he was punishing me for being honest about what I needed. The boys started asking why Charles wasn't coming around as much, and I had to make up excuses because I didn't want them thinking they did something wrong. But honestly, Charles was being really selfish, putting me in that position. These kids had gotten attached to him, and now he was basically abandoning them because I asked him to be a real partner. I tried to fix things by being extra sweet when he did come over. I'd cook his favorite meals, make sure the boys were perfect angels, try to show him what our life could be like. But he seemed determined to focus on negatives instead of seeing the amazing family we could build. That's when I realized I needed to take control. I started looking at apartments and found this perfect 3-bedroom place well within Charles's budget. I even calculated how much we'd save on childcare once I could stay home. The numbers totally made sense, but Charles acted like I was being presumptuous. I also started preparing the boys for the transition by talking about what it would be like when we all lived together. I wasn't making promises, just helping them get excited about the possibility. When Jaden asked if Charles would be his new dad, my heart just melted. These boys deserve a father figure who actually wants to be there. But Charles kept making excuses, so I decided to give him some motivation. I told him I'd been thinking about my conversation with my mom, and maybe she was right about needing to know what kind of man I was dealing with. I said I couldn't keep waiting forever for him to decide if he was serious about us. I pointed out that other men would be thrilled to have a ready-made family with a woman who knew how to take care of her children and her man. I wasn't threatening him, just being realistic about my options. If Charles couldn't appreciate what he had with us, there were other guys who would. Instead of realizing what he might lose, he got defensive and started accusing me of trying to manipulate him. Like, excuse me, I'm trying to build a future with you, and you think that's manipulation? I'm being honest about my needs and expectations, which is what healthy relationships are supposed to be about. He said he felt like I was rushing him into decisions he wasn't ready to make. But I'm like, we've been together for a year. How much more time do you need? At what point does taking your time just become stringing someone along? I told him I needed to know where we stood because I had to think about what was best for Jaden and Caden. They were getting more attached every day, and if he wasn't planning to stick around long term, I needed to know now before they got hurt. Instead of reassuring me, Charles said he needed space to think. Space. After a year of dating and building relationships with my children, he needed space to think about whether he wanted to be with us. I was honestly shocked someone could be so selfish and immature. So I told him we needed to have a serious conversation about where this relationship was going. I said I couldn't keep dating someone who wasn't willing to fully invest in our family, and I needed a clear answer about whether he was ready to take the next step or not. I explained that this wasn't just about me. Jaden and Caden had come to see him as a father figure, and they deserved stability, not some guy who was going to disappear when things got real. I told him this was his chance to show what kind of man he really was. Charles said he cared about me and the boys, but couldn't handle the pressure I was putting on him. Pressure. Like wanting commitment from your boyfriend of a year is unreasonable. He said he felt like I was trying to force him into a role he wasn't ready for, and that it wasn't fair to use the kids to make him feel guilty. But I wasn't using the kids, I was protecting them. These boys have already been abandoned by one man, and I wasn't going to let it happen again. If Charles couldn't handle being a real partner and father figure, he needed to leave before they got more attached. That's when he said the thing that really showed me who he was. He said he never signed up to be financially responsible for me and my children, and that he thought I was trying to trap him. Trap him, like loving someone and wanting to build a life together is some kind of scheme. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Here I was, offering him the chance to be part of a real family, and he's acting like I'm trying to take advantage of him. I told him if that's how he felt about us, then he was right. This wasn't going to work. So I gave him an ultimatum: either commit to our family and our future together, or walk away now and stop wasting our time. I wasn't going to keep pretending like we were casually dating when there were children involved who needed stability. Charles sat there not saying anything, and I could tell he was already checking out. Finally, he said he was sorry, but he couldn't give me what I was asking for. He said maybe we wanted different things in life. Different things. I wanted love, commitment, and family. He wanted to stay single and selfish forever. What I didn't expect was how vindictive Charles would be about the whole thing. Not only did he break up with me, but he also screwed me over on the apartment we'd been planning to move into. Even though we'd put down a deposit and I'd given my landlord notice, Charles suddenly decided he couldn't afford it and backed out completely. I was stuck scrambling to find a new place I could afford alone, while dealing with losing someone I thought I could count on. The boys kept asking when Charles was coming over, and I had to explain he wasn't going to be part of our lives anymore, without going into all the ugly details. But the worst part was finding out through social media that Charles had already moved on with someone else, some woman from his work who doesn't have kids and apparently makes good money. I saw pictures of them going on trips and doing all these activities that Charles never wanted to do with us because he was always worried about money. It was like a slap seeing how happy he looked with her. All those times he said he couldn't afford things with me and the boys, but apparently he could afford weekend getaways when it was just about him and some childless woman who had no idea what real responsibility looked like. Then the gossip started. Apparently, Charles's new girlfriend worked at the same company as my friend Jessica, and somehow the whole story got twisted around. People were saying I was some kind of gold digger who tried to trap Charles into supporting me and my kids. Like, excuse me? I was asking for partnership and commitment, not a free ride. Jessica told me Charles's girlfriend was telling people at work that Charles had dodged a bullet with me, and that I was crazy for expecting him to take care of another man's children. Another man's children. These are my sons, and any man who wanted to be with me would understand they come with the package. What really made me angry was finding out Charles had told people I was using my kids to manipulate him emotionally. Using my kids. I was protecting my kids and trying to build them a stable family environment. If Charles couldn't handle that responsibility, that's his problem. The hardest part was explaining to Jaden and Caden why Charles wasn't coming around anymore. They kept asking if they did something wrong, and I had to reassure them that sometimes adults make selfish decisions that hurt people who love them. Then my own friends started pulling away. Some of them thought I'd been too pushy with Charles and scared him off by moving too fast. Too fast. We were together for a year, and I asked him to commit to our family. If that's moving too fast, then some people are just commitment phobic. The dating scene after Charles was a nightmare. Every guy I met either ran when they found out I had kids, or they were clearly just looking for something casual. The few who seemed interested would ask questions about my ex and what went wrong, and I could tell they were judging me for having expectations. One guy actually told me I was high maintenance for wanting a partner who could support the family while I stayed home with my kids. High maintenance, like wanting what's best for my children, is somehow asking too much. But the absolute worst part was running into Charles and his new girlfriend at the grocery store about 6 months later. They were shopping together, looking all domestic and happy, and she was wearing this expensive coat that probably cost more than I spend on groceries in a month. I was with the boys, and Caden actually waved and said, "Hi, Charles," before I could stop him. Charles looked uncomfortable and just nodded, but his girlfriend was staring at us like we were some curiosity. I could tell she was judging me and my kids, probably thinking about whatever lies Charles had told her. Later that week, Jessica told me she'd heard Charles and his girlfriend were talking about getting engaged. Engaged. To someone he'd known for less time than he'd known me, someone who had no idea what it meant to build a real family or handle real responsibility. What really got to me was hearing that Charles was telling people he was in a much healthier relationship now and that he'd learned from his mistakes with me. Mistakes. Like loving him and wanting to build a future together was somehow a mistake. Like offering him the chance to be a father to 2 amazing boys was something he needed to learn from. The financial situation got worse because I'd been counting on splitting expenses with Charles. And now I was back to covering everything alone. I had to move to a smaller apartment in a worse neighborhood, and the boys had to switch schools, which was hard on them. Every time something went wrong, car trouble, medical bills, emergency repairs, I thought about how different things would be if Charles had just stepped up like a real man. Instead of having a partner to help handle these crises, I was back to putting everything on credit cards. The boys started acting out at school, probably because of all the instability in their lives. Their teachers kept calling me for conferences, asking about our home situation and whether there were any stressors they should know about. I had to explain over and over that we were going through a transition, but managing fine as a family. But honestly, we weren't managing fine. I was exhausted from working full-time and trying to be everything to my kids. I was lonely and frustrated and angry that Charles had walked away from something that could have been beautiful for all of us. Sometimes I see his posts online, and I want to comment and remind him what he gave up, but I know that would just make me look desperate. Instead, I have to sit here and watch him pretend like what we had didn't matter, like my boys didn't matter, like the family we could have built was just some burden he was smart to avoid. The boys still ask about Charles sometimes, especially when they see other kids with their dads at school events. I tell them Charles wasn't ready to be the kind of man our family needed, and that someday we'll find someone who appreciates us for who we are. Charles proved he was just another selfish guy who wanted the benefits of having a family without any of the actual responsibility. He wanted to play house when it was convenient, but when it came time to actually step up and be a provider and father figure, he couldn't handle it. And now he's probably telling his new girlfriend what a crazy ex I was, when all I ever wanted was for him to love us enough to commit to our future together.